Okay, hello and welcome everybody to this recording of the webinar, which is about supporting subject input in bilingual secondary classes. Because this is a recording, there will be some things that are slightly different from how we did them in the actual webinar, but this is just so that you can watch the recording again and remind yourself of some of the things that we talked about, or if you missed the webinar and couldn't attend for whatever reason, then you'll be able to see some of the things that we worked through in the webinar. So let's get started. First of all, I'll introduce myself. My name's Amanda McLoughlin, and I'm a teacher trainer and materials writer, and I specialise in bilingual education. So I write materials for the bilingual classroom, and I work with teachers who are teaching in bilingual classrooms also. And today we're talking about supporting subject input in bilingual secondary classes. So all of the things that we'll be looking at today are to do with ways in which we can give our learners input, ways in which we can explain things to them or demonstrate things to them, but keep them engaged and motivated to be listening to us as we're doing that. So I've got a silent challenge for you today. Working live in the webinar, we used the chat box for this. So every time a turtle appeared on the screen, they had to write turtle soup in the chat box. And we gave points to the first person who wrote turtle soup, and we had a winner at the end. For this recording, we're still going to do an interactive activity, but what I'm going to ask you to do, instead of writing turtle soup in the chat box, because you're watching a video recording, I'd just like you to note down that you've seen a turtle, and I want you to count how many turtles there are in the whole presentation, and I'll give you the answer at the end. So your challenge is, how many turtles are there on the slides in this presentation? Okay. And if we go back to a slide, because we've talked about it and I'm going back to explain something, that doesn't count twice, okay? So if you've seen a slide already and there's a turtle on it, and I go back to that same slide to explain something in more detail, it doesn't count as seeing the turtle again. It's how many are there in total, not how many times do I show them, okay? I wanted to do this activity as part of the webinar today because I use this activity as a way of keeping my learners focused on input in the classroom, especially if I'm using PowerPoint slides or any kind of visual way of supporting an explanation. So what I would do is hide little images around the slides, or you could use words if you prefer not to use images. It doesn't really matter. Either works fairly well. And just ask the learners that every time you see a turtle, stand up and clap your hands 3 times, or every time you see a turtle, shout out turtle soup, and you get a point if you're the first one to do that. And it just keeps them engaged and focused and gives them a reason to listen and to watch and to look carefully at your PowerPoint slides. If you're not using a PowerPoint, if you're just giving a verbal explanation, like explaining something in words, if you're talking about a specific content area, you kind of know what words you'll probably repeat several times because it's your topic, you know what you're going to be talking about. So you can tell the learners, okay, I want you to listen and count how many times I say the word hypotenuse or whatever it happens to be, okay? So you can adapt it a little bit to however you're giving them input. If they're reading something in a textbook, they can count words as well. Or if they're watching a video, you can count images on the screen or count words also. Or react in some way to certain images or words every time they see them or hear them, okay? So you'll see how it works today because you'll be paying lots of attention so that you can count the turtles and see if you get the right number by the end of the recording today. So let's have a look at what we're planning to do in this recording. I'm planning to be talking about input in general, but I've divided the session up into 3 main areas. And we're going to look first of all at starting your lesson, and we'll look at different things that you can do, very simple things that you can do to get your learners engaged and focused and keep them motivated and listening carefully and participating, making it active at the beginning of a lesson. So for introducing a new topic at the beginning of a lesson. We'll also be talking about keeping attention on the input, different ways that you can do that, different ideas when it's not at the start of the lesson perhaps, and other activities that you can do to keep learners engaged in what you're doing and activated and paying attention and motivated also as well. And finally, we'll also talk about some brain breaks, and we're actually going to have a brain break today. And I want you to, as you watch the recording, when we get to the brain break, I would like you to participate in that, even though you're sitting at home watching a recording of me speaking on your screen and you're not watching me live and nobody can see you. I still want you to do it because I want you to evaluate the feelings that you feel afterwards and how it makes you feel. It's important, okay? So I'll be doing it on my own, talking to my computer, so you can also be brave and do it yourselves as well. And I would suggest that you have a pen and a notebook handy, just to jot down, well, first of all, how many turtles you see, but also any other kind of ideas that you might have. There's going to be some activities where I'm going to ask you to think about what the answers might be and why. So you might want to make a little bit of a note there as well. Okay, so it's a good idea to have a notebook and a pen somewhere nearby. And if you don't have one nearby, perhaps pause the video and run and find one and then press play again when you're ready. So let's get started then with starting lessons off. So my question then is, how do you start your lessons? Here are some of the ideas that I like to use to get lessons started, especially at the beginning of a new topic or for new input. So you can use kind of questions like the one that I'm going to give you now, or problem of the day, which I'll explain in a little while. And I'll give you a couple of examples of how this activity works, and then we'll talk about what the activity is and what kinds of things you need to remember in order for this activity to work. So demonstration first, and then we'll think about how to set up this activity with different content areas or for different levels of students. Okay, so this is a very simple one, just to make sure that it's easy for you to participate. Remember to have your pen and paper handy because you'll be writing down the answers here. I have a timer on the screen here, which is a 10-second timer. So you have 10 seconds to write down your answers to these questions, okay? And each question begins with name an animal. So the first one for you today is name an animal that lives under the ground. Okay, the 10 seconds is up. You might have said worm. You might have said, what else? Mole. You might have said rabbit. Who knows what you've written? But any animal that lives under the ground is a good answer for that one. Next challenge. Name an animal that has 2 wings. So you might have gone for a bird here, maybe an eagle or a pelican or a dove or a pigeon or a robin or a sparrow, or you might have gone for an insect with wings like a beetle or a dragonfly. You might also have gone for a mammal like a bat. So anything that you've written there that has 2 wings, well done. Next one, name an animal that can swim. Oh, sorry. I think we've probably got 5 left there. Okay, time's up. So you might have said the typical ones, the ones that live in water, like fish, sharks, dolphins. You might have said turtle as well. Some turtles can swim, can't they? You might have said snakes. You might have said, what else can swim? Ducks can swim. There are many insects and bacteria that can also swim as well. Let's go to the last one now. This is the last one. Let's see if you can answer this one. For this one, you're not allowed to repeat any of the animals that you have already written. You have to think of a different animal for the next one, okay? Name an animal that has no legs. So you might have said snail or snake there. You might have said worm. You might have said fish, for example. Okay, as long as you haven't repeated any of the previous ones, all of those are valid. How many points did you get for that? Did you get something for everything in the 10 seconds? The good thing about this activity in the classroom is that your students will come up with lots and lots of different answers. And the really, really good part of this is that there will be some answers. For example, an animal that has 2 wings, they might say dragonfly, and somebody says, what's a dragonfly? Or an animal that has no legs, they might say jellyfish, and somebody says, what's a jellyfish? So not only are you generating lots of vocabulary, you're also generating interest to find out, well, what's that? You know, what does that mean? So the students who perhaps hadn't heard of that animal before are asking questions to find out what the meaning of, you know, how to say that animal in their own language. So you're generating interest in finding out how to say things in English, which is always really important as well. Now, obviously, I've done this with animals. You can do this with your own content from your own, you know, subject area. Let me give you an example that's more specific. This might be very easy for you. It might be more difficult for you. This is from a more specific, like secondary level content area. So you can see how it would translate across to a different kind of subject area. You could go with something like name a metal, right? In this one, it's slightly different because all of these there's only one answer for this, okay? And there's different clues. And you have to count how many clues you needed to get the correct answer. If you answer the correct answer after one clue, you can have 5 points. If you need 2 clues, you get 4 points. If you need 3 clues to get the answer correct, you get 3 points. If you need 4 clues to get the answer correct, you get 2 points. And if you need all of the clues to get the answer correct, then you get 1 point. And if you need to look at the picture because there's a picture at the end, then you don't get any points. Okay, so you're counting how many clues you need before you say the correct answer. Now, to make sure that everybody can participate all the way to the end, of course, I'm not going to say the answer to the end. So each time a clue comes up, write what you think the answer could be. And then you can see very clearly where your first correct answer was. And you can give yourself your points, okay? So name a metal that has a reddish metallic colour that is unique among all the elements. That's clue number 1. Clue number 2 is name a metal that was the first metal to be worked by man along with gold and meteoritic iron. What could it be? And the third clue, name a metal that's an essential element for human nutrition. It's an essential element for human nutrition. What could it be? Name a metal that readily forms alloys with other metals. That means it chemically joins together to form a new metal, an alloy. Name a metal that is a natural antibacterial agent. Okay, so that was your 5 clues. And then finally, here's the picture. And the correct answer was copper. So if you got copper after the first clue, then you get your 5 points. If it took you 2 clues, you get 4 points and so on until you know how many points you got. Okay, so you can add that to your points from the previous activity if you like and count up how many points you have so far. Other things that we can use, like problem of the day or those kinds of quizzy kind of activities that we can do to introduce a new topic, they're great ways of accessing prior knowledge. So you could do those, you could do the metal questions before you've taught them about the metals to see how much they already know. You can do the animal questions before you've started studying animal classification to see how much they already know. Okay. So one thing that you can use this for is to check if your students know the prior knowledge that you expect them to have, to check what they already know about a topic that you're just about to teach. You can also use this to check if they've done their homework, right? So if you've asked them to read up about copper as a metal for their homework, then they should be able to get the answer to that fairly quickly. If they haven't done their homework, it might take them longer to do that. You can also use it to check if you've started giving input and you think that everybody's understood. You can use these kinds of activities as a way of checking to make sure that you can actually move on to the next thing. So if you notice that they can't answer the questions, then you could say, okay, I need to do more input. So it's a way of checking your input as well. And to check if there's any students that actually have it now, and you can maybe set them another task to do while you work with the ones who need more time on input. You could also ask students to summarize explanations in their own words, and you can use it to get students thinking about the topic of the lesson that you're about to teach them, okay, to get to increase their interest and motivation in that particular topic that you're about to do. Remember that you need to ask open questions. In both of the examples, they were slightly different questions, but they were quite open. You could give many, many different answers. In the second one, there's only one answer which is correct, but you could have answered for each clue. There were many answers which are correct. That's what makes it interesting, when you have lots of different answers. You'll get more ideas, and look how much language you'll get from those kinds of activities. You'll get lots of language. It's a very linguistically rich activity for the classroom. You can also ask your students to share ideas on a certain topic. So you could ask them to answer with a partner. Okay, you can ask these kinds of questions or quizzes and get them to share their ideas with a partner. They're great for getting students to explain their answers or define the words that they've used to answer and share knowledge with the rest of the class. And you can also ask these kinds of open questions to ask students to summarize the explanation in their own words. Okay. So we're going to take a little brain break. Remember, you have to participate for the brain break, even though you're sitting watching a recording on your own at home. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to just roll our heads round on our necks like this, stretching the neck and the shoulders a little bit. That's it. You can go backwards a little bit if you want to, side to side. Just loosen up the shoulders a little bit, right? Once we've loosened up our shoulders, then we can do a little bit more there, drawing circles with your elbows here. Okay, do 2 circles with each side and then change again, 2 more with the other side. Okay, I'm not doing it quite as energetically as our friend here, but in the classroom you'll definitely have some of your students being more energetic than others. And the last thing that we're going to do is just to have a little stretch. Yeah, stretch out to one side and to the other, maybe both arms up, both arms to the sides. That's it. Oh, yes, very good. Now, I want you to reflect on how you're feeling having done those little activities. We haven't got up from our chairs, we're still sitting down. So there are exercises that we can do without, revolutionizing the classroom. We don't have to have everybody up and moving around. They're just very simple stretches that we can do sitting down. But at the end of it, I can guarantee that you were smiling more than you were before the activity started. So you translate that into the classroom. After doing a couple of 2 or 3 very simple stretching activities like this, you look at the students' faces and you'll see how many more smiles you can see. It helps get oxygen to the brain, helps them disconnect, especially if you're doing something that's very difficult or complicated, helps them disconnect for a couple of seconds, to then be ready to come back and concentrate again. And actually their concentration levels after doing something like this will be much higher than if you ask them to concentrate on something and then concentrate on something else. The second activity, they don't concentrate very well. If you ask them to concentrate hard on something, then take a brain break and then concentrate on something else, the brain break helps them to make sure that their concentration levels for the second activity are also high. So I really recommend including a brain break in your classes. We'll talk at the end of the presentation today, at the end of the video, I'll talk about different ideas for things that you can do as brain breaks and things that you need to remember when you're planning your brain breaks. Okay, so we'll come back to this. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a break there. So moving on to giving input. Now, input quite often involves students listening to something or reading something. And if they just listen or read passively with no actual task to do, then it's very easy for them to switch off or not really pay attention to what they're listening to or reading. Okay, so when we have a text, now a text could be something that's written or something that's spoken. It could be a video, it could be something in a course book, it could be a handout, it could be a teacher's explanation. Any of those things classify as text. When we have a text, if we ask our students to read and listen at the same time, they engage on a very different level with the text, and they generally understand it much better. They're able to follow it much better. So for the recording today, I've got some very simple examples just so you can see how it works. But this works especially well when you've got a really complex explanation that you need them to understand. If they're reading at the same time as listening, then they'll understand it much better. It's much easier for them. Okay, and that can even be just reading aloud. Okay, but reading and listening, try to involve both things at the same time whenever you can. So this is one thing that I like to do. So I'm going to explain, imagine today I'm in the maths class and I want to teach my learners how to calculate the circumference of a circle. Now, I'm not a maths teacher, so I've chosen something that's fairly simple to explain, because if I try to explain something complicated, I'll get a bit lost probably. So I've chosen something simple to make it easy for myself. It's just as a demonstration. So if you're within your content area, you're trying to explain something, then this is a great way to make sure that your learners understand it well and are engaged and motivated and listening carefully. So I know that I'm going to explain how to measure the circumference of a circle. I'm going to explain it to my students first, and then we're going to do some practice activities. But before the class, I write down something like this and I hand it out on a worksheet, or maybe you could have it on a slide on the board, or just, write it on the board before the class. And I say to the students, I'm going to tell you how we measure how we calculate the circumference of a circle. And I want you to listen carefully to the explanation and write the words that you think are missing from the text that you have. Okay, are you ready? I'll ask you actually to do this if you can. So take your pen and your paper. So to calculate the circumference of a circle, first we measure the radius in centimeters. Next, we multiply the radius by 2. This will give you the diameter. And we can calculate the circumference by multiplying the diameter by pi. We express the circumference in centimeters. Okay, so I won't repeat that in class. I might do that 2 or 3 times just to make sure that they have an opportunity to hear it. And then I would give them the answers. You can check your answers there. If you need to, you can pause the slide. And they would check that they've got the answers correct and correct anything that they didn't get right. And then I know that I've explained how to measure the circumference of a circle, and next we're going to go on to actually start doing some practical activities in which they put that into practice. And I know that on their tables, on their desks, or on the board possibly, we have a written version of what I said so that they can refer to it if they've forgotten. So I know that they've got, something that they can use and keep, and that they won't forget it so easily. And I know they've been listening carefully and participating, and that they're ready to move on to the practical activities. So let me explain to you why I love this activity so much. I've already started explaining a little bit, but unfortunately, some of the words in this summary are not correct. So I want you to listen carefully to what I say and see if you can identify, first of all, which words are not correct, and secondly, what word should it be then? If you hear a word is not correct according to what I say, what is the word that I said then? Okay, so again, if you've got pen and paper, do jot down your ideas here. I'm going to do this fairly quickly because you're not my students in the class, but with the students I might do it a couple of times and I would go a little bit more slowly. So students have to pay attention with this activity because they'll miss important information if they don't. The information is structured so the students don't have to worry about the grammar, and everyone has the same text. The notes of the students are all exactly the same. And it helps you as a teacher to check their understanding of the concept. Okay, so I did that quite quickly, and I'm just going to give you the answers now. But you can see how closely you listen when you're given a listening task to do. So I said the students have to pay attention. They miss important information if they don't. It's structured. They don't have to think about how to write the sentences. The sentences are written. They're just listening for specific words. And I know that everybody has a copy then with the correct version on it at the end of the activity. So I know that they can then refer to that whenever they need to. And it helps you to check their understanding. Because if they got a word wrong, it may be because they're misunderstanding the concept a little bit. Or maybe they've just misheard, but maybe they've misunderstood the concept. So it gives you the opportunity to say, no, it's not that, but why is it not that? What do you think? And so on. Okay, so you can check their understanding. Other activities that you can do which are similar, you can give them texts with anagrams, like these ones. This is from a science textbook, and this one is from an art textbook. Both of these are examples that are taken directly from textbooks. You don't have to invent your own text for this. Textbooks are input too. So I would put these on the board and say, okay, what's what do the anagrams, what words are missing? What's the topic for today? Now open your books and read about it. Okay, so it's a way to introduce the topic, a way to get them interested, a way to get them interacting with the information in a slightly different way. So if you're watching this video, you can pause here and think about what those words might be and take a few seconds for that. Some of them are really easy. Some of them are much more difficult. I'll warn you now. And then when you're ready, press play again and we'll have a look at the answers. So here are the answers to that previous activity. So the first text was about nutrition and the function of the circulatory system within the body's process of nutrition. Okay. Transported was probably a difficult one there. In the classroom, I would take any word which is a synonym, because they're thinking about what could it be? What could it be? That it are transported, are carried to, are taken to our organs and bones, are needed by our organs and bones. Anything that makes sense is a good answer there. So you're getting them to think about the content as well. And then this one, cubism, analysed was a difficult one there. So it's good to mix up the slightly more obvious and easy ones with the slightly more difficult ones, because it gives all of the learners a challenge on different levels as well. Another thing that you can do is take key sentences, summary sentences from your textbook or from a video that you're going to show them, and just do this unscramble the sentences activity. 2 or 3 sentences is plenty. And then once they could do it in pairs even. Once they've unscrambled the sentences, then you could say, okay, now read and find the sentence in the text, or watch the video and put one hand on your head every time you hear one of the sentences that you've unscrambled, or something like that. So if you pause the video before, here are the correct answers. You don't really need to do this to understand how it works. Okay, so very simple sentences that summarize a key concept that we're working on, but get the students thinking about it beforehand, or while they listen, or while they read. Okay. You could also give them the sentences and include those sentences in your own explanation, so that they can hear you saying them as a part of their input. Another lovely activity to do while you're giving input is a great way of checking their understanding, or of checking what they already know about a concept that you're going to teach. Now, I've chosen animals for this because it's an area that most people know enough about to be able to answer the questions. But the older the students are, the more detailed and interesting their answers are going to be in response to an activity like this. Now, this is an odd one out. You have to say which one is different from the others. But it's a little bit different from a normal odd one out activity, and I'll explain why in a second. First of all, let's see which are the things that we're going to choose between. So first of all, we have a fox. There we have an owl. We have a spider, an elephant, and a tortoise. So which one would you say is the odd one out, and why? Again, pause the video just for a few minutes. Think very carefully about which one is different from the others, and see if you can write down a sentence or a word or two that explain why it's different. And then when you're ready, press play again. So doesn't really matter which animal you chose here, because they all could be the odd one out, couldn't they? The fox could be the odd one out because the fox is the only one that has thick fur on its skin. Or the fox is a nocturnal. Well, the owl is also nocturnal as well, isn't it? So that couldn't be right. The fox is the only one that lives in a burrow. Well, maybe the spider lives in a burrow also. Okay, so maybe the fox is a bit difficult. What about the owl? The owl is the only one that has feathers. It's also the only one that has a beak and wings. Is it the only one that's oviparous? No, actually, there's more oviparous animals here too, aren't there? It's the only one that flies, though, isn't it? Is it the only one that lives in a tree? No, because spiders can live in trees as well, can't they? What about the only one that eats small mammals like mice and chickens? No, because a fox would eat small mammals as well. Okay, so we found some things that would make the owl different. What about the spider? The spider's the most popular choice because it's clearly an invertebrate, whereas the others are vertebrates. A spider has many more legs than the others, has 8 legs instead of just 2 or 4. Mind you, the owl could be different because it's got 2 legs instead of 4, right? It's got 2 legs and 2 wings, whereas all the others have more than 2 legs. The spider has no skeleton because it's an invertebrate, but it does have an exoskeleton. None of the others have an exoskeleton, although the turtle does have a shell. And the spider has many faceted eyes. And what else? And it spins a web. And it's probably the only one that eats flies and insects. Would you say? Maybe turtles eat insects too sometimes? Possibly. Some species of turtles might eat insects too. The elephant is definitely different from the others because it's very big, whereas the others are all quite small animals. And the elephant has a trunk and tusks, which the others don't have. The elephant is a mammal, but then again, so is the fox, so that doesn't make it different. The elephant lives in Asia and Africa, whereas the others are found all over the world in many different places. The elephant is a herbivore, although I'm not sure if some species of turtle are also herbivores, so possibly that's not a difference. It's a mammal, but we said before that the fox is also a mammal. Okay, so those are the differences for the elephant. And finally, the turtle. Well, the turtle is different because it's the only reptile. It has a shell. The others don't have a shell, although the spider does have an exoskeleton, which is slightly different, I think. A turtle has a beak instead of teeth, but then again, so does the owl. And I don't think the spider has any teeth either. So maybe that's not a difference. A turtle, what else could we say about a turtle? You can see the idea anyway. These are all the things that the learners will come up with. So it's very linguistically rich in that they have lots of different things that they might think of and come up with, and all of the learners will contribute with different ideas and things that they can think of for that activity. So it's a really nice activity in that sense as well. You can adapt that activity to more specific subject content, like in this example from geography. This is from Internet Geography, a web page, and there's the link up there. And you can see how you don't have to use pictures. You can make it much more adult and use much more specific geographical terms, but do the same thing. The important thing is to make sure that every single answer in the options, whether you have 4 or 5, every single one could be correct. That's where you get the interesting discussions and the generation of lots of language. If there's only one correct answer, in the previous slide, for example, if spider was the only acceptable answer, then you get someone saying spider because it's an invertebrate, and then you move on. Whereas if all of the answers are correct, you generate a lot more discussion and language. Well, this one, no, but this one also, blah, blah, blah. So the same kinds of things that I was saying when I was summarizing the previous slide, you'll get that from the learners. They'll be asking you, how do you say beak in English? How do you say tusks in English? And so on. Okay, so it generates a need for them to want to learn how to say things in English too, which is always a positive thing. Other ways that you can use images. Images can be a fantastic way to generate discussion, thinking, ideas, creativity, and so on. This is a quite well-known image. You may have come across this before. I show this on the screen and I ask the students to tell me what they think is happening. What do you think is going on here? So this could be something to do with social geography, different cultures around the world and so on. I'll give you the backstory for this, but I wouldn't tell the students the backstory until they've generated lots of discussion and had lots of guesses. And I would ask lots of questions. Well, who are these people? Why do you think they're from this place? Or do you think that they're children or adults? Why? What's the building? What's going on inside? Are they trying to get in or trying to get out? You can ask lots of questions to help guide the discussion a little bit. The backstory here is that these are exams in India or possibly Pakistan, Bangladesh, somewhere around that region. And these are the parents of the students who are taking the exams, and they're climbing up to hand notes through the window to their children to help them get good grades in the exam. And it's considered normal and appropriate for parents to be this concerned about their students' learning and their exam results. And if you don't do it, you're seen as a bad parent, apparently. So you can compare that to how things work here. Talk about cheating in exams. Do you use chuletas? Have you ever done it? Would you recommend it? And so on. Does it help? In what ways does it help? And things like that. Compare it to different cultures. Another one, this would be for a science class. You can use memes, funny things, jokey things where, there's a kind of a science edge to this. This is about climate change, obviously. So again, we're talking about geography, possibly. But you'd ask them to respond to the words in the picture. What do you think the message is? You know, how does that make you feel? What's it saying about this company? What is this company with this logo? What do they do? Why are they saying time to melt some ice? What are they talking about here? Right. So get them to investigate and explain and you know, dig a little bit deeper with the meme. Other things that we can do with images, I mean, if you're working, again, I'm going back to animal classification, but imagine you're working on invertebrates and you could say to them, okay, the input would be a lot more detailed than this, but at the end of the input, so you could say, okay, so we've talked about the different kinds of invertebrates, and we've said that arthropods, echinoderms, porifera, mollusks, and annelids are all different, and they have different characteristics and features. We're going to have a little quiz now to check how much you know. Get your pen and paper ready. I want you to write the word. Are you ready? What is this? Okay, it's a starfish, but what classification is it? If you think you know, pause the video, write it down, because I'm going to show the answer in a second. And the correct answer is an echinoderm. Okay, and this is interesting, especially with words that are difficult to spell. So having these little challenges, right, I'm going to show you a picture and you have to tell me what it is, but I want you to write it down. And a great way to do that is using mini whiteboards, because then you can check everybody's spelling as well. And you don't have people listening to other answers and copying. You really get a really good, clear picture of how many people really knew the answer in the classroom. Mini whiteboards also for all sorts of different activities of the previous ones that we've done. They work really, really well in class. So if you haven't got mini whiteboards, I suggest that you get some, even if it means just laminating pieces of white paper with some board pens and some baby wipes, and they're a great tool for the classroom. Another really interesting thing that we can do is, you know, using keywords, ask the learners to illustrate the word itself. Let me give you some examples of that. And it's a good idea to give your learners examples first so they can see what you're asking them to do. So in this one, this is a maths word, and we could say parallel, and look, the L's are all parallel to each other. So you're illustrating the concept within the word itself, using the letters to help illustrate the word. Here's another one, moon, and it's a satellite going around the Earth. This one's tsunami, where the S becomes the wave. And this one from art, where you've got Van Gogh, you've turned the G the other way, and it looks like an ear that has been cut off, right? So anything that you're working on, any topic you're working on, you could give them a word and say, I want you to illustrate the word so that it contains, in your illustration, contains the written word, but also illustrates the concept. So we've been looking in the previous activity, we've been looking at invertebrates and invertebrate classification. So I might say, if I'm doing that with the students, I might say, look at these illustrations of concepts. Now I want you to do something similar with the word arthropod or echinoderm or whatever, porifera, whatever it happened to be, and get them to give them a little bit of time to actually come up with illustrations. If you want to, you can pause your video and just have a little go at that. It's a really fun thing to do. I did it, and I'm going to show you my version of the answer here. Oh, sorry, went on to the next one there. So there's my arthropod. Look, I've made arthropods out of the two O's. So arthropods are called arthropods because they have jointed legs. So I've made sure that my two examples have very clear jointed legs there so that you can see that specific characteristic of arthropods. So you could do that. Whatever your subject area is, you'll have words, which are keywords that convey something about your subject, and you can give those to your learners and get them to illustrate them. So we talked earlier about brain breaks, and I'd just like to go back to that very quickly before we finish off and just say, you know, doing things like a GIF workout or any kind of movement activity is a great way to have a brain break, because it gets the blood circulating, oxygen back up to your brain, and it brings a smile to your face. Body-brain challenges involve things where one half of your body is doing one thing and the other half of your body is doing the other thing. For example, rubbing your tummy and patting your head at the same time. I can't actually do it. But challenges like this, like clicking the fingers of this hand and making a circle with that hand, or whatever it happens to be. Tap your leg and click your fingers, I don't know, whatever you want to do. Chair yoga and breathing exercises are also really, really good. If you go to YouTube and just type in chair yoga, you'll get lots of really short little videos that you can show your learners in class just to get them doing some stretching activities in the classroom. You could also get them to play Pictionary with their virtual whiteboards if you're using tablets in the classroom or laptops, or with your mini whiteboards, if not, with keywords. So, you know, you could say peripera. They have to draw very quickly and hold it up, and the first one to hold up a correct drawing gets a point or whatever. Or you could read out some riddles connected to your topic area, or just random riddles if you prefer, and tongue twisters. It doesn't have to be something that's connected to the input or the content. It can be something completely different. And then you come back to the content again afterwards. And another thing I like to do is just put on videos with no words and no particular thing happening. There's some lovely videos of cameras in zoos that are on the jellyfish tank, and you just see the jellyfish floating around in the tank, and you can just zone out for a little while, or a rabbit eating raspberries without any dialogue or text, and you just watch that for a little while, or rain falling, something like that on YouTube. They're really good, just for 20 seconds or so, and then you can come back, and they really, really help to keep the learners focused. Tips about using brain breaks: keep your brain breaks to under 2 minutes. If they're too long, they turn into activities and they distract from what you're trying to do. So keep them short. That's very important. You can use a countdown timer, especially if you're using something like a YouTube video that's quite long. You might say, we're only going to do 1 minute of this, or 30 seconds of this. Or if you're watching one of those videos like the jellyfish, for example, just 10 seconds of jellyfish and then we'll go back. You can ask your kids to vote for their favourite brain breaks, for example, say which ones they liked after they've done a few different ones, and they can start to choose them themselves. Or you could create a master list of brain break activities yourself, and then every day you pick 2 or 3 and then let the kids choose between those 2 or 3. So you could write on the board at the beginning, jellyfish video, chair yoga, tongue twisters. And then you say during the lesson, when they've had a really intense moment of input and they need a brain break, you say, right, choose one of those 3. Let's vote. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Okay, number 3 it is today. You do that brain break and then go back to the next stage of your lesson. Or you could allocate brain break managers. This works very well, especially with children who are easily distracted. Children with special educational needs quite often like to be the brain break managers as well, but I would give every child in the class a turn to be a brain break manager. So I'd say, Juan, it's your turn to choose when we have the brain break today. At any moment during the lesson, you can put up your hand and say brain break, please. You as the teacher will have something ready for that, obviously, and Juan gets to choose when that happens. So Juan will, you know, take his responsibility very seriously and say, okay, teacher, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I'm going to put my hand up and say brain break, please. And it's very interesting to see how they don't, because they can only choose one moment of the class and there's only one of them get to choose. They think very carefully about when they want to actually have their brain break. So obviously, if you have any questions, you can send them by email or whatever through the team. I'm sure that they will get forwarded on to me and you can ask them. Hopefully you don't. Hopefully it was all useful and relevant and valuable for you, and that you've learned lots of things and that you've got some really good, simple ideas that you can adapt to your own teaching context, no matter what age your students are, no matter what subject area you're teaching. You can definitely use most, or if not all, of those ideas in your classes. So thank you for watching, and thank you for using your pen and paper to note down your ideas. If you were counting turtles, which I'm sure you were, there were 6 turtles in total. So if you got that right, you can have another 10 points, as well as all the points that you earned from the activities that we did today. And I'd just like to say thank you very much and hope to see you in another recording of a webinar sometime soon.